breathe out. Super. Now that you're relaxed, we can start with the interpretations of Atlantis. Some ancient writers viewed Atlantis as a fictional or metaphorical myth. Others believed it to be real. Aristotle believed that Plato, his teacher, had invented the island to teach philosophy. The philosopher Granta, a student of Plato's student Xenocrates, is cited often as an example of a writer who thought the story to be historical fact. His work, a commentary on Timaeus, is lost, but Proclus, a Neoplatonist of the 5th century after Christ, reports on it. The passage in question has been represented in the modern literature either as claiming the Granta visited Egypt, had conversations with priests, and saw hieroglyphs confirming the story, or as claiming that he learned about them from other visitors to Egypt. Proclus wrote, As for the whole of this account, these Atlanteans, some say that it is an adorned history such as Granta, the first commentator on Plato. Granta also says that Plato's contemporaries used to criticize him jokingly for not being the inventor of his republic, but copying the institutions of the Egyptians. Plato took these critics seriously enough to assign to the Egyptians this story about the Athenians and Atlanteans, so as to make them say that the Athenians really wants to live according to that system. The next sentence is often translated. Granta adds that this is testified by the prophets of the Egyptians, who assert that these particulars are written on pillars which are still preserved, but in the original the sentence starts not with the name Granta, but with the ambiguous here. Whether these refer to Granta or to Plato is the subject of considerable debate. Proponents of both Atlantis as a metaphorical myth and Atlantis as history have argued that the pronoun refers to Granta. Alan Cameron argues that the pronoun should be interpreted as referring to Plato, and that when Proclus writes that we must bear in mind concerning this whole feat of the Athenians that it is neither a mere myth nor an entombed history, although some take it as history and others as myth. He is treating Granta's view as a mere personal